Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and hi if you're new to the channel, and sorry about that background. I might cut it out if I knew how. So guys, we're gonna continue reading Marley, A Dog Like No Other. And so guys, we're gonna do it. Chapter 4. 6 points, guys, if you want to test this on AR. Let's get started with Chapter 4. Master and Beast. Marley was growing up fast. When he was small, his skin was so droopy that he looked like he was wearing an oversized yellow fur coat. By the time he was 5 months old, his body had filled out the wrinkles. His giant puppy paws no longer looked like canine clown feet. His needle-sharp baby teeth had turned his fangs that could destroy a frisbee in a few quick chomps. His high bark had deepened to a scary boom. When he stood on his hind legs, he could rest his paws on my shoulders and look me straight into the eye. The first time the vet saw him, he let out a soft whistle and said, "We're going to have a big boy on your hands." And we did. We were not the only ones to notice. Our front door had a small oblong window at eye level. Marley lived for company. Whenever someone rang the bell, he would streak across the house. Then he'd go into a full skid as he approached the foyer, sliding across the wooden floors and tossing up throw rugs along the way. He didn't stop until he crashed into the door. With a loud thud at the door, he'd hop up on his hind legs and yelp wildly. His big head filled the tiny window as he stared straight into the face of whoever was at the door side. Terrified, strangers ran from the beast, then raced to the middle of the driveway and waited for someone to answer the door. After breakfast for morning, Jenny and I decided to walk Marley down to the water for a swim. When we reached the little beach, I wagged a stick in front of Marley's face and took off his leash. He stared at the stick as if he were a starving man staring at a loaf of bread. His eyes never left the prize. "Go get it," I shouted, and hurled the stick as far as onto the water as I could. He galloped down the beach. As he entered the shallow water, plumes of spray shot up around him. This is what Labrador retrievers are born to do. It is in their genes. Labs are known for their desire to fetch. People bred these water dogs to help hunt birds. Once a bird was shot, the dog would race to get it. Sometimes that meant leaping into ice-cold water to get the dead animal and bring it back to the hunter. These loyal friends never expected a reward for their hard work. Marley had inherited at least half of the instinct. He was a master of chasing his prey. He didn't quite get that. He was supposed to return it. He might as well have said, "If you want the stick that bad, you jump in the water for it." Marley charged back onto the beach with his prize in his teeth. Bring it here, I yelled, slapping my hands together. Come on, boy, give it to me. He pranced over, his whole body wagging with excitement and shaking the water sands all over me. To my surprise, Marley dropped the stick at my feet. Wow, how's that for service? But when I reached down to pick the stick, Marley was ready. He dove in, grabbed it, and raced across the beach in the crazy figure eight. He swerved back, nearly colliding with me, taunting me to chase him. I made a few lunges at him, but he was too fast and agile. You're supposed to be a Labrador Retriever, I shouted, not a Labrador Evader. Maybe Marley had strength, but I had brains. I grabbed the second stick and made a big deal about it. I held it over my head and tossed it from my hands. I swung it from side to side. He crept closer until he was just inches in front of me. I rubbed the stick across his snout and watched as he went cross-eyed, trying to keep it in his sights. The little cogs turned in his head. He tried to figure out how he could grab the new stick without giving up the old one. His upper lip quivered. I wonder if I could make a quick 2-for-1 grab, he seemed to be asking himself. Soon I had my free hand firmly around the end of the stick. In his mouth, I tugged and tugged back, growling. I pressed the second stick against the nostrils. You know you want it, I whispered. And did he ever? The temptation was too much to bear. I could feel his grip loosening, and then he made his move. He opened his jaws to grab the second stick without losing the first. In a heartbeat, I whipped both sticks high above my head. He leaped in the air, barking and spinning, obviously at a loss to how such a carefully laid battle plan could have gone so wrong. This is why I am the master and you are the beast, I told him. In response, Marley shook water and sand in my face. I threw one of the sticks out into the water, and he raced after it, yelping madly as he went. When he returned, he was a new, wiser opponent. This time, he was cautious and refused to come anywhere near me. He stood about 10 yards away, stick in mouth, eyeing the new object of his desire. It just happened to be the old object to his desire, his first stick. Now it was perched high above my head. I could see the cogs moving again. He was thinking, this time I'll just wait right here until he throws it. Then he'll have no sticks and have both sticks. You think I'm really dumb, don't you, dog? I said. I heaved back and hurled the stick. With all my might, Marley roared into the water with his stick still locked in his teeth. The only thing was I hadn't let go of mine. Do you think Marley figured that out? He swam halfway across the water before catching on the stick. It was still in my hand. You're cruel, Jenny yelled down from her bench, laughing. When Marley finally got back on shore, he plopped down in the sand, although he was exhausted. He was not about to give up his stick. I showed him mine and reminded him how much better it was than his. Drop it, I ordered. I cocked my arm back as if to throw the The dumb dog bolted back to his feet and began heading for the water again. Tries, but finally he did just that, and the instant his stick hit the sand, I launched mine into the air for him. We did it over and over, and each time he seemed to understand a little more clearly. Slowly, the lesson was sinking into that thick skull of his. If he returned his stick to me, I would throw a new one for him. You've got to give it to get, I told him. He leaped up and gave me a sloppy, sandy kiss. I guess that meant he learned his lesson. As Jenny and I walked home, the tutored Marley for once did not strain against his leash. You know, I said to Jenny, I really think he's starting to get it. Jenny looked down at him, plodding against beside us. He was soaking wet and coated in sand, spittle foaming on his lip. He clenched his prize stick in his jaws. I wouldn't be sure of that, she said. Chapter 5. A Battle Wills. When Marley was quite not 6 months old, we signed him up for obedience classes. He definitely needed them, despite his stick fetching breakthrough on the beach. That day, he was proving himself a challenge. Student, dense, wild, and constantly distracted, we were beginning to figure out that he was not like other dogs. We needed professional help. Our veterinarian told us about a local dog training club and offered basic obedience classes. When we went to the register, Marley, we met the woman who would be teaching our class. She was stern, no-nonsense dog trainer who believed that there are no bad dogs, only weak, wild, and hapless owners. As Jenny, Marley, and I arrived for the first lesson, Marley spotted the other dogs scattering with their owners across the tarmac. A party, he barked. He leaped over us and out of the car. He was off in a tear, his leash dragging behind the car. Behind him, he darted from one dog to the next, sniffing private parts, dribbling pee, and flinging huge wads of spit through the air. Sniff, sniff, dribble, dribble, fling, fling. For Marley, it was a festival of smells. He stayed just ahead of me. I raced Scoot a feet farther away. Upon him, he would scoot a few feet farther away. I finally got close. Taking a giant leap, I landed hard with both feet on the leash. He stopped with a sudden jerk. For a second, I was convinced I'd broken his neck. He jerked backward, landed on his back, flipped around, and gazed up at me with the same expression of a kid who has just eaten very last piece of candy in the candy store. Meanwhile, the instructor was staring at us as if I had thrown off my clothes, danced naked right there on the blacktop. She was not amused. Take your place, please, she said curtly. Jenny and I tugged Marley into a position. You are going to have to decide which of you is going to be the trainer, she added. The instructor didn't understand that we both wanted to participate, so each of us could work with him at home. I decided to explain, but I began, a dog can only answer to one master, she said, cutting me off. But I said, this time her glare silenced me. I slunk to the sidelines with my tail between my legs, leaving Master Jenny in command. This was probably a mistake. Marley was already way stronger than Jenny, and knew it. The instructor began her introduction on the importance of establishing dominus, dominus, I don't know, over pets. I don't know whatever that word is. That's when Marley spotted the standard poodle on the opposite side of the class. He lunged off with Jenny in tow. All the other dogs sat 10 feet apart beside their masters. They waited for instructions. Jenny was fighting to plant her feet and bring Marley to a halt. Forward, ho! Marley seemed to be telling her. He lumbered on and tugged her across the parking lot in pursuit of hot poodle butt sniffing action. Jenny looked like a water skier being towed behind the powerboat. Everyone stared. Some snickered. I covered my eyes. Marley crashed into the poodle. Everyone waited as he sniffed every inch of her. I imagined it was his way of saying, nice to meet you. Jenny tugged with all of her might, but Marley ignored her. I'm not done yet, he seemed to be saying. Finally, he finished saying hellos, and Jenny was able to drag him back into place. That class is an example of a dog that has been allowed to think he is an alpha male of his pack. The instructor announced calmly, all right, he's in charge. Marley agreed by attacking, his tail spinning wildly at his jaws, snapping at thin air. In the process, he wrapped the leash around Jenny's ankles until she fully immobilized. I winked and was thankful that it wasn't me out there. The instructor showed the class how to command dogs to sit. Sit, Jenny ordered. Marley jumped on her and put his paws on his shoulder, and she pressed his butt to the ground. He rolled over for a belly rub. She tried to tug him into place. He grabbed the leash in his teeth, shaking his head from side to side as if he were wrestling a python. It was too painful to watch. At one point, I opened my eyes to see Jenny lying on the pavement, face down. Marley stood over her, panting happily. She later told me that she was trying to show him down command. Class ended, and Jenny and Marley rejoined me. So the teacher, you really need to get control of the animal, she said with a sneer. Well, thank you for that valuable advice. Actually, we signed up just to make the rest of the class laugh. At least, that's what I wanted to say. Actually, neither of us breathed a word. We just retreated to the car in humiliation and drove home in silence. The only sound was Marley's loud, excited panting. Finally broken the silence. He sure loves school, I said. The next day, Marley and I were back, but this time without Jenny. When I suggested to her that I was probably the closest thing to an alpha dog we were going to find in our home, she gladly relinquished brief her brief title as a master and a commander. Before leaving the house, I flipped Marley over on his back, towered over him, and growled in my most intimidating voice, "I'm the boss. You're the boss. I'm the boss. Got it, Alpha Dog?" He thumped his tail on the floor and tried to gnaw on my wrist. The night's lesson was walking on heel. I was eager to master it. I was tired of fighting Marley every step and yanked her off her feet, leaving her with bloody knees. It was time he learned not to trot by our sides. I wrestled him to our spot on the tarmac, pulling him back from every dog he passed along the way. "Class, on the count of 3. The instructor called out, 1, 2, 3. "Marley, heel," I commanded. As soon as I took my first step, he shot off like a fighter jet from an aircraft carrier. I yanked back hard on the leash. He coughed and gasped on the collar, tightened around his airway. He sprang back in an instant and lunged forward again. I yanked back. He gasped again. We continued like this the entire length of the parking lot. He was like the entire length of the parking lot. He was coughing and panting. I was grunting and sweating. "Rein that dog in," the instructor yelled. I tried with all my might, but the lesson wasn't sinking in. I thought that Marley might just strangle himself before he figured it out. Meanwhile, the other dogs were prancing along their owners' sides. The instructor had the class line up and try again. Once again, Marley lurched like a maniac across the blacktop with his eyes bulging. He strangled himself as he went. "Here," the instructor said impatiently. "Let me show you." I handed a leash to her. She tugged Marley around into position. He pulled out on the collar as he ordered him to sit. Sure enough, he sat eagerly looking up at her. With a yank on the leash, the instructor set off with him almost instantly. He barreled ahead if he were pulling the lead sled and a dog sled. She corrected pulling the lead sled. She corrected hard, pulling him off balance. He stumbled, wheezed, and lunged forward again. It looked like he was going to pull her arm out of its socket. Ew! And creepy. I should have been embarrassed, but I felt an odd sort of satisfaction. She wasn't having any more success than I was. My classmates snickered, and I beamed with perverse pride. I wanted to yell, "See, my dog is awful for everyone, not just me." I had to admit, the scene was pretty hilarious. The two of them reached for the end of the parking lot. Then they turned and lurched back toward us. The instructor scowled. Marley was joyous beyond words. She yanked furiously at the leash, slobbering with excitement. Marley yanked back harder. Still, I could tell what he was thinking. All right, tug of war. When Marley saw me, he hit the gas. Filled with near supernatural speed, he made a dash for me. The instructor broke into a sprint to keep from being pulled off her feet. Marley didn't stop until he slammed into me with his unusual exuberance. The instructor shot me a look and told me I was in trouble. Marley had made a mockery of her class. He had publicly humiliated her. The instructor handed the leash back to me. Okay, class, on the count of 3, she said, pretending the whole thing hadn't even happened. When the lesson was over, she asked if I could stay after a minute. I think your dog is still a little young for a structured obedience training, she explained. He's a handful, isn't he? I said. Now that's what we had shared, the same humiliating experience. I felt as though we were friends. He's simply not ready for this, she said. He has some growing up to do. It was beginning to dawn on me what she was getting at. Are you trying to tell me he's a distraction to the other dogs? That he's just too excitable, kicking us out of class? You can always bring him back in other 6-8 months. So you're kicking us out. I'm happily just you a full refund. You're kicking us out. Yes, she finally said. I'm kicking you out. Marley lifted her leg and let loose a ragging stream of pee, nearly hitting his beloved instructor foot. Sometimes a man needs to get angry to get serious. The instructor had made me angry. I owned a beautiful purebred Labrador Retriever, a proud member of the breed, famous for its ability to guide the blind, rescue disaster victims, assist hunters, and pluck fish from big ocean swells, all with calm intelligence. How dare she write him off after just 2 lessons? Okay, he was a bit on the spirited side, but his intentions were all good. I was going to prove to that insufferable stuffed shirt he would show her. First thing the next morning, Marley was out in the backyard with me. Nobody kicks the Grogan boys out of obedience school, I told him. Untrainable. We'll see who's untrainable, right? He bounced up and down. Can we do it, Marley? He wriggled. I can't hear you. Can we do it? He yelped. That's better. Now let's get to work. We started with the sit command, which I had been practicing with him since he was a small puppy. He was already quite good at it. I towered him over him and gave him my best alpha dog scowl. Sit, I said in a firm but calm voice. He sat. Good boy, I praised. We repeated the exercise several times. Next, we moved to the down command, another one I had been practicing with him. He stared intently into my eyes. I next straining that forward, anticipating my directive. Directive. I slowly raised my hand into the air and held it there as he waited for the word. With a sharp downward motion, I snapped my fingers, pointed at the ground, and said down. Marley collapsed in a heap, hitting the ground with a thud. We went down with gusto, as if a mortar shell had just exploded behind him. Jenny, sitting on the porch with a coffee, noticed it too. "Incoming," she yelled. After several rounds of hit the deck, I moved up to the next challenge. "Come on, command. Come on, command." This was a tough one. Marley, and the coming part was not the problem. It was waiting in place until he called him. He was so anxious to be plastered against as that we could not sit while we walked away from him. "Sit," I commanded. He faced me and fixed my eyes on his, and as we stared at each other, I raised my palm, holding it out in front of me like a crossing guard. "Stay," I said, and took a step backward. He froze, staring anxiously, waiting for the slightest sign he could join me. On my fourth step backward, he could take it no longer and broke free, racing up and tumbling against me. I scowled him and tried it again and again and again. Each time he allowed me to get a little farther away before charging. Eventually, I stood 50 feet across the yard with my palm out toward him. I stood and waited. He sat locked in position, his entire body quaking with his anticipation. I could see that nervous energy building in him. He was like a volcano ready to blow, but he stayed. I counted to 10. He did not budge. His eyes froze on me. His muscles bulged. "Okay, enough. Torture." I dropped my hands and yelled, "Marley, come!" as he catapulted forward. I squatted down and clapped my hands to encourage him. I thought he might go racing willy-nilly across the yard, but he made a beeline straight for me. "Perfect," I thought. Come on, boy, come on." I coached. He was barreling right at me. "Slow it down, boy," I said. He just kept coming. "Slow down," he said, this vacant, crazed look on his face. It was a one-dog stampede. I had time for one final command. "Stop!" I screamed. Blam! He plowed into me without breaking stride. I pitched backwards, slamming hard to the ground. When I opened my eyes a few seconds later, he was strangling me with all four paws. Lying on my chest. In despair, licking my face. "How did I do, boss?" my proud puppy seemed to be asking. Technically speaking, he had followed orders exactly. After all, I had failed to mention anything about stopping Once he got me to mission accomplished, I said with a groan. Jenny peered out the kitchen window. I'm off to work, she shouted. When you two are done making out, don't forget to close the windows. It's supposed to rain this afternoon. I gave Linebacker Dog a snack, then showered and headed off myself to my job as a newspaper reporter. Wow, this is long. When I arrived down that night, Jenny was waiting for me at the front door. I could tell she was upset. Go look in the garage, she said. I opened the door into the garage, and the first thing I spotted was Marley lying on his carpet, looking sad. My mind took a photo of the scene. Marley's snout and front paws were not right, and they were dark brown. Not their usual light yellow. It took me a few seconds to figure out that they were covered in dried blood. Then my focus zoomed out and I sucked in my breath. We had thought the garage was indestructible, but Marley had destroyed it. Throw rugs were shredded. Paint was clawed off the concrete walls. Ironing board was tipped over and fabric covering hanging in ribbons. Worst of all, the doorway in which I stood looked like it had been attacked with a chipper. Shredded bits of wood were sprayed in a 10-foot semicircle around the door, which had a hole halfway through the other side. The bottom 3 feet of the door jamb were missing entirely and nowhere to be found. Blood streaked the walls from where Marley had shredded his paws and muzzle. I don't believe it, I said, more amazed than anger. When I came home for lunch, everything was fine, Jenny said from behind me. But I could tell it was getting ready to rain. After she was back at work, an intense storm has moved through, bringing with it thunder was so powerful you could actually feel it thump against your chest. While the storm raged, Marley had desperately tried to escape. The storm had sent into complete panic-stricken frenzy, alone and terrified as the storm came. Marley and I Marley had decided his best chance at survival was to begin digging his way into the house. When Jenny arrived home a couple of hours later, Marley stood in the middle of the mess he had made. But it didn't take long for Marley to forget the whole incident. Back to his old self, he grabbed a chew toy and bounced around as looking for a little tug-of-war action. I held him still while Jenny sponged the blood off his fur. Then he watched us, tail wagging as we cleaned his handiwork. You don't have to look so happy about it, I scowled, and brought him inside for the night. Chapter 6. Guys, I'm gonna get water. Chapter 6. The Great Escape. One thing was clear. Jenny and I loved our dog, but hating a bunch of little Marleys running around in the world, but not a good idea. It was time to make sure Marley couldn't make any puppies. Jenny and I decided to have him fixed so he would never be a fodder. As we got ready to take Marley to the vet, he bounced happily off the walls. Yippee! His excited movements told us he could tell he was going for a car ride, and he didn't care where. For Marley, any trip was a good trip. It didn't matter where he were going, for how long. Take out the trash, no problem. Walk to the corner of the gallon milk, count me in. When I was told, Marley bounded out the door and into the car. He was revved up and ready to go. Jenny drove and I sat in the passenger seat from the back seat. Marley balanced his front paws on the center console, just like he always did. His nose touched the review mirror every time Jenny pressed the brakes. He went crashing into the windshield. Marley didn't care. He was riding shotgun with his two best friends. Life doesn't get any better than this, his puppy Joy announced. I rolled down my window a bit, and Marley leaned against me, trying to catch a whiff out of the outdoor smells. Soon he squirmed his way fully out onto my lap. He pressed his nose so firmly into the narrow crack of the window that he snorted every time he tried to inhale. Do you want a little more fresh air, buddy? I stick out his snout. He was enjoying the sensation so much. I opened it farther. Soon, his entire head was out the window, his tongue hung out, and his ears flapped behind him in the wind. Was he happy? As he drove down the highway, Jenny and I talked pretty soon. I noticed that Marley had hooked both of his front paws over the edge and half open window, and now his neck and upper shoulders were John. I'm just going to start over to this page. Was he happy as we drove down the highway? Jenny and I talked pretty soon. I noticed that Marley had hooked both of his front paws over the edge of the half-open window, and now his neck and upper shoulders were hanging out of the car too. He needed a pair of goggles and a silk scarf to look like one of those World War flying aces. John, he's making me nervous, Jenny said. He's fine, I answered. He just wants a little fresh. At that instant, he slid his front legs out of the window until his armpits were resting on the edge of the glass. John, grab him, Jenny yelled. Before I could do anything, Marley was scrambling out of the window of our moving car. His butt was up to the air, and his hind legs were crawling for something to hold on to. He was making his break. His body slithered past me. I lunged for him and managed to grab the end of his tail with my left hand. Jenny was braking hard even though there was traffic all around us. Marley's entire body dangled out the moving car, hanging upside down by his tail. My body was twisted around, and I couldn't get my other hand on him. Marley was frantically trotting along, his front paws on the pavement. Jenny stopped the car in the left-hand lane. Cars lined up behind us, their horns blared. Now what? I yelled. I was stuck. I couldn't pull him back in the window. I couldn't open the door. I couldn't get my arm out. And I didn't dare to let go of him. I convinced he'd dash in the path of one of the angry drivers swerving around us. With my face scrunched against the glass, I held on for dear life. Jenny put on the car's flashers and ran around to my side and grabbed Marley and held him by the collar until I could get out and help her wrestle him back into the car. All the action had taken place directly in front of the gas station. As Jenny got the car moving again, I looked over to see that all the mechanics had come out to take in the show. I thought they were going to pee in their pants. They were laughing so hard. Thanks, guys, they called out. Glad we could brighten your morning. Chapter 7, The Things He Ate. So, guys, we are going to end right here, and we're going to read more this afternoon or evening. I read at the evening, too, sometimes. And, guys, we are not even close to the end. There are, if you watched my first video, you would know, 24 chapters. And that would be, add that up, guys, that would be 14 more. No. There is 24 chapters, and that would be a lot left. So, guys, bye! And that would be 17 more chapters. Bye! If you subscribe, like, and comment all down below. Do that, all of that stuff. Until it turns gray. I spy something red.